multipolar order has significant implications for the way nations interact and cooperate on the international stage, as well as the potential challenges and opportunities that it presents for global governance. And that's why we are looking at multipolarity holistically, taking us to the just ended forum which held in Moscow, Russia, that brought together about 360 stakeholders from some 130 countries across the globe, including from Africa, Asia, Europe, Latin and North America, to brainstorm on the geopolitical stakes as ways to curtail and also ways to curtail Western hegemony through a more unified and multipolar world. Of course, during this program, we want to navigate the complexity and also discuss what was discussed actually at the forum. Some stakeholders from Africa address this forum, the likes of Kemi Seber and others, pointing out on the latest development, especially pertaining the crisis in the West African regional bloc, ECOWAS, and of course looking at the dynamics and relating it to how a world multiple be defined to ensure that we fight new colonialism, put an end to infringement, especially in the sovereignty of nations, to also ensure financial independence, especially of developing countries and Africa in particular. So this is what we are going to be brainstorming in the course of today's program, Global Insight. And for you, media, I want to thank you already for taking this rendezvous. Time to uncover the panel. Getting now to YULIA BERG, joining us from Russia, Moscow. Hello to you, YULIA. It's a pleasure having you this day on the program Global Insight as we continue to discuss the concept of multipolarity, taking, of course, the recent forum which held in Moscow recently.
Hello, thank you for the invitation. Happy to join today.
It's always a pleasure, and looking forward to having a constructive discussion as usual with you. We are equally joined by Patrick Poppel, who is a geopolitical analyst and expert at the Center for Geopolitical Studies in Belgrade. Hello to you, dear Patrick. It's a pleasure having you this day.
Hello, thank you for the invitation. I'm every time glad to be here.
It's always a pleasure that you are glued to, for you, Media Africa, for us to continue to talk issues which not only concern the African continent, but actually looking at how we can be part of the constructive change towards a global world order. We're talking about living from a unipolar or bipolar world to a more connected world in the concept of multipolarity. We want to comment, first of all, dear Yulia, with you on the stakes discussed during the recent multipolarity summit or forum that held in Moscow, Russia recently. To note that this forum followed an earlier forum that actually sought to analyze how they can put an end, the work can put an end to new colonialism. And holistically, let's understand the concept of this forum and the objectives.
Well, one of the most important things to mention here is that we see that the change happening at the global arena is absolutely inevitable, because the interest to events of the kind that aim to discuss how the post-transformation world will be looking like is growing. And we see people joining from different countries. We see that they represent groups of people, large groups of people, and we do understand that even in European countries where people are currently quite limited in what they can say publicly, there are much more people that also stand for traditional values, that also stand for cooperation rather than using the resources of entire, let's say, populations. And we see that at the end of the day, most of the people prefer to be located in a more stable and peaceful situation. So when you see one party directly benefiting from the other party, making it literally suffer, this is not a stable system, and it's not something that can be durable. So those events taking place here and in many other places, they just indicate that there are more and more people who are ready to publicly and openly talk about it, and a lot more people that understand that the changes are inevitable, and those have economic foundations, they have spiritual foundations, and I think that's solid enough for the situation to be changing maybe even faster than we all expect.
Absolutely, talking about situations changing faster than expected. Being one of the participants of the forum, Patrick, we want to understand, of course, we're looking at how this can redefine or reshape international politics. So, given the deliberations at the forum, I want us to answer this question. How can the concept of multipolarism in global politics impact the distribution, especially of power and influence among nations across the global world?
So first, it's important to know that this forum takes place in Moscow, in Russia. So we can see in this the role of Russia. This is the first point I like to explain, yes? That Russia has its role in the world for other countries. But it's not only to say, maybe many people say, this is, yes, they are saying Russia, it's the one and only. No, not. Russia takes part in this development of multipolarity. But the role of Russia, it's very high, because they are now the place for these discussions, first of all. But I think also that all these ideas, they are coming from there, these concepts, they're coming from there, will be a good fundament for national policy of other countries. So we can see Russia as a place and the source for the fundament to change the politics in the different countries, but not by the influence of Russia. It's very important. It's only like I don't like to say it's a supermarket, but it's like a shop. People come and see and have talks and get informations, and they are transporting this to their own countries, and so they are discussing there something, and so in different areas, beginning from politics to economy, so there will be changed something. So this is my impression of the last conferences I met. Also this conference 2 days before, but also in the last 2 years, there were many of these events, and there are many international guests take part, and they are have the possibility to collect information, to collect ideas, and this will be the fundament of influence, but not influence like America is influencing something or the West is influencing something. It's the they are like to have this influence. They like to have this possibility to will be connected with other countries and something else. It's not like you know this pressure or something else. So it's not, and also we couldn't in this way. I like to say it's my experience. We couldn't use the word soft power, because this is not soft power. Soft power is when you like to do something, to have influence there, to make pressure and something else. But this is only to offer them, to offer the different civilizations to think about their future. This is a big difference to the way how the West is working. It's a very big difference for me. So like to say this is my result of this forum I take part.
Absolutely, continuing in the same perspective, talking about influencer, let's dive directly to the second question, which I'm relating to you, dear Yulia. We've actually listened to the holistic approach regarding the discussions or deliberations at the multilaterality forum, and of course, while talking earlier, Patrick mentioned about influence. The question is, we know Russia and other BRICS nations are so instrumental in creating this a multipolar world, a new world order that actually wants to give the right to each and every nation, of course, ensuring the connectivity and equality in every aspect, and also ensuring that nations can have their identity, their culture, and other sovereignty. The question is, let's try to understand, because critics have been very bent on saying things like there is maybe, for example, the BRICS will maybe infringe into nations, especially developing nations. So let's try to draw the line between cooperation for change, like Patrick mentioned, not trying to influence, but trying to see people see development from a different perspective. So let's draw the line between this cooperation for change and interference that will actually hijack the sovereignty of nations, and of course bringing us back to the Western hegemony that we are fighting against in this present context.
I believe that one of the most negative consequences of living in a situation when there is constant pressure from someone dominating the global arena in terms of economics, in terms of culture, in terms of pretty much everything, is that many people are having this kind of victim mentality, right? Because the ideas that were being promoted is that the Western way of living, culture, values, and whatsoever else are universal and are supposed to be accepted by everyone as something to aim for. But now we see how that system has led to destructive consequences. We see that many people are not even satisfied with their own identity, or in many cases they try to change everything, including their lifestyle, appearance, and everything else. And this doesn't just go to talk about the complicated, gender, transgender rhetorics that are being implemented and are being promoted, destroying the family values, destroying the very core of human beings as biological species, right? But one of the consequences, the reason why I'm talking about this victim mentality in the first place, is that you just mentioned that those rights and sovereignty would be given. No, those are to be taken, and the only way to change the global, let's say, principles and the global approaches is to realize that sovereignty and to take it up, that sovereignty for each individual, group of people, nation. And I'm not talking about some revolutionary actions that are supposed to take place, but I'm talking about the mentality itself that can only change from within. So let's look at, for instance, African countries and what's happening in terms of the economy of several countries in the Western and Central Africa, refusing to use the CFA franc, right? So the only way to get out of that system is to claim the right to decide, to claim the right to own economy, to claim the right to make the decisions in terms of economy and finance, and say, okay, we're countries that are rich in resources, we have an incredible human potential, we have it all, and we think that our economy is worth this and that, and we want to be able to set rules for trade. we want to be able to choose our own currency. We don't want those decisions to be made by some external actor. Otherwise, that sovereignty and that, let's say, variety of rights, including from economic to the right to choose own value systems and everything, it would never be given, because if it's expected to be given, it means that someone owns them, and unless there is a sovereign actor saying, no, I own the right to make my own decisions, nothing would happen.
Indeed, rights to make our own decision and nothing happening. Let's try to relate this. I mentioned earlier on, dear Yulia, that BRICS nation have been very instrumental and at the fore to defining a multilateral world. You talk about especially the revolution in the African continent, particularly in West and Central Africa. So the question is, now that these global and major changes are occurring, how then can emerging or the rise of emerging powers in the BRICS impact the balance of power in the multipolar world and reshape traditional global alliances? And I think you know, the development or the changes in the world has actually affected international cooperation. So how do you think BRICS coming in can impact or reshape traditional global alliances that will try to concretize the philosophy of multilaterality?
20 years ago, the BRICS countries were much smaller in terms of their GDP, in terms of their economy. But now we see that the economies of the BRICS countries combined are even greater than the economies of the G7 countries combined. So we see that it's a natural process, and we see that China, for instance, having almost like most of the production in the world and being the key trade partner for so many countries, it is a player that you cannot really avoid. And the Chinese approach was never about political interventions. It was never about trying to dictate the rules of the game for, you know, their partners. They do dictate the rules of the game in terms of trade with China itself. They do prefer to use their own institutions and infrastructure and everything else, but they do not try to change, again, the way of living, the political regimes in the countries they work with. So this demonstrates much more respect. And even though they're gigantic in terms of their economy, and you know, if China was acting like the United States do, saying, okay, we don't like you, we put sanctions, we don't trade with you anymore. So, you know, their trade partners wouldn't have been getting nothing, from cell phones to, you know, fridge magnets. No one would have anything, because if you wherever you are, whichever country you are at the moment, if you just look around your home, most of the stuff would be made in China, or at least a significant amount of you know, the equipment and everything else would be made in China. But we see the differences in those approaches. Then India is a country that is approaching China both in terms of population and in terms of the economy. But again, we see a completely different approach, and the very foundations, the very basis is a completely different philosophy, because their economic might is based on real value, is based on real production, is based on trade, and it's not based on a bubble like the current American or European systems are. So for the United States and for Europe, it's critical to maintain monopoly in media. It's critical to maintain that kind of cultural or psychological monopoly, which has the ability to dictate and affect value systems, basically manipulating the minds of millions of people into tricky and in many cases quite destructive concepts that are promoting their interest, right? So it's a completely different approach. Like it's the very same difference between between high self-esteem based on skills and actual competences, and high self-esteem based on you know, a crown you put on yourself for no valid reason, right? So that kind of people tend to be more aggressive, passive aggressive, or actively aggressive. And I mean, whatever can be told about it at the personal level could also be valid at a higher, you know, country level. So we see that BRICS brings the real value, and that's why they don't need to get into sophisticated manipulations. It can be kept quite simple, clear, and respectful.
Indeed, respectful. And when we talk respectful, I think we are referring largely to respecting the sovereignty or autonomy of independent nations that enter into alliances, be it especially economic alliances. In the same perspective, we've talked, Yulia has highlighted so much about the Western style way, which has largely actually not helped the global world, and we are aware of the global changes happening now. Patrick, in what ways have the emergence of non-Western powers challenged the dominance of Western-centric institutions? We are looking at a multipolarity that seeks to bring peace and to bring concrete solutions to the global crisis facing the world at large, and to ensure equality and maintaining the norms and even culture of respective nations. But now we see that this is challenging the supremacy of Western powers. Of course, we know international relations is all about power and how it is being used. So the question is, we already know that the emergence of non-Western powers have challenged the dominance of actually Western-centric institutions and the norms in the international system. So the question is, how is this influencing the evolution of multilateral cooperation that seek to change the narratives along political lines, economic lines, and even social lines?
So I said many times before about this problem that we have these international institutions dominated by the West and influenced by the Western interests. The United Nations was created, it was founded for the Western interests, because the top countries, the top parts of them are Western countries, and they are watching down on the countries in Africa, South America, whatever. Yes, and so also the same situation you have this in this World Health Organization. We have the same situation in the European Union. The European Union, okay, they must fight for the interests, but they have no interest to support and to discuss with the other continents on the same level. This is arrogance from the West, and this is, I think, the biggest problem. It's the biggest problem now, and multipolarity is the only way on the philosophic level to give an input, to give an idea for other countries to think, to create new structures. It is my idea. Yes, I think there are other ways also, but it's important to create new structures, and BRICS show us this, and other different initiatives can show us this. It is very important to create new structures on all levels of society, economically, also on the level of the security, yes, and also on the level of culture. This is very important. Not believe in these big international organizations. They are founded by the West, and they are also now under control of the West. And you can see what's happened in Gaza, in Ukraine, they are not the same level. They, they are talking today in Austria. I was analyzing the media of Austria, and there was they are talking about the Russian aggressive war against Ukraine, and then they are talking in the same show. It was the same show in the television about the offensive of Israel against Gaza, but not aggression war. Yes? So they have not the same level for everybody, and this is very, very dangerous. Also for the future development in Africa and Asia, because they can also use these narratives. So because we need an open discussion and not this narrative of the West. This is a very big danger for the interest of sovereign countries and the people. And so I hope that we can create structures, and there will be structures of a new world, but this world will be not dominated by one country or one continent. There should be a world that have a very, very good connection to all continents and without some supremacy. Yes, we don't need some lord about us.
Yeah.
We don't need somebody who's telling us what we should do in this world. So not in metaphysics. So only in the level of the world. It's not normal that one country can say to the other people what they should do. It's not normal. And so I think the development goes completely in this direction. And I believe in this, that the next years will be very interesting, but it will be a solution for the people in all countries. So this is my result of the analytics.
And of course, the goal is to bring a solution to many problems affecting the global world. And we are conversant of the crisis across the global world, the Russian-Ukraine crisis. We are going back to Africa, looking at the Eastern Democratic of Congo, the east of the Congo that is in turmoil, looking at the Central African, actually Central African region, and coming back to the Western region with a lot of political grievances and some sort of discontentment that has led to a whole lot of crises occurring across the global world. Now we can see a series of interconnected crises. So Patrick, now the question is, when it comes to conflict resolution and others, we think about global diplomacy in solving this. So how do you think this the shifting alliances and partnerships in a multipolar system can affect or maybe direct the dynamics of global diplomacy and conflict resolution?
So I think that that it's a question of the fundament of the philosophy in which standing the people are. So when you have diplomats and diplomacy from the states, because it also depends on the people they're working there, and they are influenced by the idea that they are the best, the world, the one and only. They are working only in the interests of the country, and they're only working very hard against the interests of others. And when you have this influence in the fundament of thinking, so there are other important states, countries, continents, yes. So it will be give some relaxation. They are relaxing, and so they can also understand the interests of the different countries, the peoples, the interesting groups, and this will be changing the global diplomacy in any way, I think, in every way. So we are living in very interesting times when the global thinking is changing. This is very important. And this change every part, every area of the diplomacy, of the security policy, of the economic policy, and everything. This is very important, and people must understand this, and I hope also the people in Africa understand this, that now we are living on the beginning of a new century. It's a new century, and I hope it will be good for all of us, and I pray for this. Now I must leave because I'm on travel. Yesterday I was in Moscow, and now I'm on travel. I must leave this discussion. Mm-hmm. Greetings to you, your team, and Yulia. But important is to know for the people. I like to make up. I don't like preaching here, but I like to animate the people to do something. To do something. Also for the people in Africa. The people out there are also lazy, like in Europe. People are lazy, but we must be strong. We must be strong to make new initiatives, to take part on new initiatives, to do something. It's very important for the people on every continent, Africa, Asia, Latin America, to create our new world. This is very important. Take part on this. And I think there are many possibilities, and I like to congratulate everybody.
Yeah.
To do something and to be a hero. We need heroes for creating this new world, and everybody can do something for this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the greater insight. Indeed, Africans and Africa understand the changing dynamics, and it is time for Africa, of course, to be Africa's voice to be heard at the global level. Coming to the perspective of Africa with you, dear Yulia, I will first of all read an excerpt that was actually summarized from the intervention of some Africans, stakeholders that actually were part of this multilaterality forum, which I will read. Now we want to withdraw from ECOWAS. This is a turn towards Russia. We will create our own currency. We are a sovereign state. It is very difficult to lock out of the system. It was built a long time ago. But we are doing this, and we and our ally Russia supports us in this. Therefore, this forum is in need of is what is needed for Africa and for the whole South. The question after this, except, dear Yulia, is now with an ally as Russia. We know the role Russia played in the independence struggle of African states, and we see in the 21st century how Russia has been very involved in Africa lately. So the question is, in this multipolar world, how do you think less or small economically powerful countries can leverage the idea of multipolarity to advance their own interest on the global stage or the world stage, especially with the help of its partners like the Russian Federation?
Well, point number one would be that those countries do have relatively small economies in the current economic system, but it doesn't mean that those countries do not have everything that is needed to have a bigger value in their economy, because African countries, unfortunately, are rich countries with poor people. That's exactly the point. And if you look at once again, how the European Union or certain countries of the European Union, especially France, have built their economic power, it was mostly based, and still is, mostly based on cheap resources coming from Africa, because they don't have the resources of their own, and that's why they always had to play games with Russia in order to get resources. And sometimes they would be playing games, sometimes they would be trying to attack, so that would differ throughout the centuries. And with Africa, the very same thing. So there was some kind of independence given to African countries back in the 60s, 70s, when the active struggle and fight for independence was ongoing. But that's exactly the case, you know, exactly like the point that I mentioned earlier, that the kind of independence or sovereignty given would always be limited. So that kind of independence given back in the 60s and 70s to the African states did not mean actual economic and actual political sovereignty and ability to make own decisions. So it was just a different shape that colonialism took, and this is exactly what we call neo-colonialism or the new colonialism. So that's an important point, number one, that African countries are rich in terms of their resources, but moreover, human potential, right? So it's the youngest continent, and the future belongs to the ones that will be living in that future, to the young people. So Africa is definitely number one in terms of that, and it has to take the place that should rightfully belong to it, right? So in terms of Russia and its possible, let's say, role in this process, what Russia is doing now is that it's showing that a country that doesn't have an economy strong enough or big enough, because here, you know, strong and big are different things. Russian economy is based on real value. It's based on resources. It's based on the infrastructure. It has the fundamental science that allows to implement different kinds of, you know, inventions and equipment. It has complete control of its critical infrastructure. And that's why the economy is strong and durable. And this is what we see with all of the sanctions coming in, right? There have been already more than 10 packages of sanctions, but they didn't really kill the Russian economy. And moreover, it shows growth, unlike the economy of the European countries. So it shows that it's durable and strong and resilient, but it's not as big as the Chinese economy or the American economy back, or that it can fight smart, right? Because Russia is not even using all of its military potential, as you know, the war that it's currently involved into is a war that Russia never wanted to fight, right?
Yeah.
It's one of the divide and conquer strategy consequences that unfortunately we face, losing hundreds of thousands of people on both sides, and those are the same brothers, you know, brothers and brothers on both sides. So it's very unfortunate that we have to go through that. And this is just setting an example to African countries that there is a way out. And I think the spirit of this struggle already means a lot, not just for African countries, but also for Asia, for South America. So it shows that it's possible not to, you know, not to drop on your knees, but to continue standing strong, even if you're the only one standing, right? And everyone else is almost on their knees, right? So this is just an important example, and this is what Russia has demonstrated back in the 60s and 70s, that it's ready to, you know, spill blood together with Africans fighting for independence. It's ready to supply weapons. It's ready to work together on security and defense and fair trade and infrastructure, the very basics, right? So the approach here is different, and there are many, for instance, manipulations going around both in media and academia in terms of the
difference from Africa identified publicly Russia as an ally to the African continent, while they cited their quest to fight for the continent's especially economic independence. And we know that when we talk about Russian presence in Africa, many people always pertain it to military presence. So in the world of multipolarity, we also see a boost in multilateralism, and the African continent being at I can call it at the epicenter of these changing dynamics. So the question is, how can the Russian Federation actually maybe define itself in the
Yes, and unfortunately, there is no clear answer. I think if there was a clear answer, the situation would have already been different, right? Because the current global economic system is, let's say, rooted well in the United States and London, controlled by the global elite. But the problem is not even that. The problem is that everyone has accepted the system. So in order to build an alternative one, the first thing you need is a certain kind of consensus on switching to an alternative model. So if a group of countries would just try to implement some alternative system, that would pose a live threat to the petrodollar system. And the petrodollar system would use all of its military might, all of its, PSYOP might, and all of the means possible in order to it would have been really nice if it was possible to do it in some positive and constructive way without the necessity to go through something like the third World War, especially if we're talking about open military conflicts. But it looks like the desire of the existing system to fight back till the last, drop of blood, it would still be present out there. An alternative way could be if countries would start building up gradually to introducing that system, and I wouldn't be surprised to see that this process could attract many actors in quite a short period of time, because the negative effects and the disadvantages of the existing system are becoming more and more obvious, and the actors that are supposed to control the definition of the term is the fact that there are multiple actors that bring something to the table. So another key parameter to have in a multipolar system is sovereignty that allows to choose. And once you have different kinds of offers, and once you have sovereignty that lets you choose the best option that best suits your interests, then it means that you make optimal decisions. So this is the key to the mutually beneficial cooperation that everyone is talking about, right, as the desired future. Another important thing is that it creates competition. When you have healthy competition going on, it means that actors try to improve themselves, improve their products, and try to get better at what they're doing in order to be competitive and more attractive to the ones that can choose them. So that, again, creates healthy competition. What we see happening now is that suppressed sovereignty, suppressed ability to make own decisions, victim mentality that was mentioned before, just wouldn't allow the competition to be taking place. And so one of the key threats of any unipolar system or hegemony is that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So if you can impose your will on millions, if not billions, people globally, and no one can resist, then sooner or later you start abusing the situation even less beneficial for the public. So that is the key, I believe, to multipolarity, and at the same time to the very principles of interaction of countries at the international arena.
About interaction, about global cooperation or international cooperation, and in the concept of globalization, like you mentioned in your discuss, Yulia, about the fact that when major changes are about to come, we always see something of the turbulence that we are actually experiencing in the global world at this particular moment. It was from the era of the COVID-19, and of course the Russia-Ukraine crisis, and also the political revolution across the African continent. These major changes defining a clear path for a new world order for a world, of course, of multipolarity. Some of the questions we continue to answer in the course of the program, just to remind our televiewers that they are welcome and they are on the program Global Insight, a platform where we share insightful information on issues of optimal issues of global interest, of course. And today we are looking at the concept of multipolarity, brainstorming on the stakes discussed at the just ended from the organizer in Moscow, Russia, to continue to analyze and to define ways on how to move from this bipolar, unipolar world and bring a new world order that is inclusive. And this is how we are looking at how alliances, cooperations can actually work differently from what traditional past have actually done in the past. Of course, Yulia, you underlined that the Second World War actually redefined a new system that the global world is actually using at this particular moment. We continue to look at how we can bring resolve to the interconnected problems affecting the world. And we're talking about, we want to look at the concept of security and defense under multipolarity. So how do you think the concept or the ideology of multipolarity can influence the dynamics of security and defense cooperation among nations, and of course, especially with nations that have some sort of computing
are fighting against terrorism. Terrorism is something very vague. So if you really want, you can call anyone a terrorist. So Russia is being called a terrorist state right now by the Baltic states, for instance. Israel is not called a terrorist state, even though it is attacking civilian population on a massive scale. You know, the United States are not called a terrorist state, even though they are responsible for deaths of millions of people, including hundreds of thousands of children in countries like Yemen, in countries like Afghanistan, in countries like Syria, and many others. And some of those effects, or how they call it, collateral damage, with this very cynical term, right? So sometimes it resulted from their defense alliances that are used right now. And we see how that very thing has become, again, another instrument of manipulation, another instrument to create fear among the public for them to support the fact that billions of money or US dollars are being spent for the military-industrial complex, and millions of people are losing their lives because someone in the elite decided that they wanted to expand their sphere of influence. So when you look at it on a global scale, and you look at it in a bit more philosophical way, rather than focusing on the interests of specific countries or specific elite groups, transformations, or let's say individuals separately, and humanity as a whole is going through transformations. And now with the access to information and internet, those processes are speeded up. So, you know, once again, I'll just provide an example from more of a interpersonal level, right? So when you have, for instance, I don't know, 3-year-olds playing with toys, right? Inability to discuss how to use the toys and, you know, who takes turns and how and everything would lead to a lot of fights among them. Or when you look at, you know, just the way the conflicts, interpersonal conflicts were settled, you know, some time ago, or by the people who have less of education and ability to explain themselves and explain what they want, they would tend emotions and situations and how to explain what they want and what the terms and conditions could be. they can agree and arrange. So you're not likely to see adults fighting for, like toys or whatever items. Sometimes you can, of course, but it's not a typical scenario. So I think, the very same logic can be applied to the level of the international affairs as well. And this is exactly what the current phase of development is all about, for not just for people, but also for entities like countries to learn to agree instead and negotiate instead of using the military potential. And going back to the conflict between Russia and Ukraine that you just mentioned, it's a perfect example of how for 8 years Russia was insisting on implementation of Minsk instruments, implemented equipment and trainings and everything else. And for the United States to get onto the land of Ukraine and to build their bases and biolabs, as the Russian Ministry of Defense is saying. So we see, the whole variety of different tricks being used instead of direct negotiations in this case.
And talking about direct negotiations, dear Yulia, and patterning of the Russia-Ukraine crisis, and also relating to interconnected crises across the global world. And in our preamble, we highlighted some of the aspects of the world of multipolarity, looking at a more diverse, but actually
intentions put in it can be destroyed in less than 1 minute, just simply because someone wants to, get more resources, expand the power, and whatsoever else. So this is a terrible thing, and we will all be seeing consequences of all of those conflicts again for generations to follow, because many people die, children grow up without parents, everything gets destroyed, and it needs to be reconstructed from the bottom up, and many other negative consequences occur. So we see that events of the kind are always a huge test for humanity. And regardless of the side they were at, people that have gone through such conflicts, they always stand for peace because they know the price that was paid for somebody else's interests. So I think that the actual reconstruction, resurrection will come from those areas that were most affected by such crises, right? And we see Libya, for instance, and the incredible dignity that the people of Libya demonstrate. They are the ones that have gone through destruction, and only now that peace is back into some of the regions, like the city of Benghazi, for instance. I mean, you wouldn't recognize it from what it was even like 3-5 years ago. Libya, a country that was so prosperous, it was one of the leading ones in terms of so many things, with such a developed social service, such developed social services, education, science, and everything else. And then all of it was destroyed just in a course of, several months, and then it lasted for years, this, slow destruction. And what you could see in Libya back then were slave markets where you literally could buy a person, considered to be like cheap or free labor for a couple of hundreds of dollars. This is insane. And I mean, now seeing what's happening in Libya and how it gets reconstructed and how people, keep their dignity and try to work on those constructive issues, it's just incredible. So I think, once again, that restoration and revival of the whole globe would come from those regions that were affected by the terrible disasters of useless and senseless destruction.
Absolutely. Let me come back to a statement you make. Those making the decisions are not those actually suffering the consequences. And of course, I would term this as a challenge already to the new world order, and of course, to the concept of multipolarity. So, how can we define or anticipate possible solutions towards addressing or the challenges of multipolarity and making the scope actually fatal for mankind, for the voices, especially the voices of the vulnerable to be heard? Of course, this is a concluding statement as we are about ending the program for this day.
You know, unfortunately for many adult people, the only strong motivation for development is a crisis that they face. So unfortunately, in many situations, you really need to go through something disastrous like a war, like a major conflict, in order to have the motivation to develop. Sometimes you need to hit the very bottom in order to change the direction that you choose, right? So it would have been great to hope that collectively we have reached a level of development that would allow to choose constructive paths without hitting the very bottom. But at the same time, the way it functions, just like, you know, the famous Ubuntu philosophy that implies I am because we are, right? Unfortunately, we need to realize that we cannot transform, we cannot kind of pursue that paradigm shift unless the weakest one is already there. So we need to look not just at the avant-garde, the ones that have come to certain realization and have offered alternative systems at the international global level as well. But we need to look at the weakest ones, and we need to realize that as humanity, you know, humanity as a whole will not change unless we support the weakest ones in the first place in order to ensure that smooth transition. So I think you know, concluding the program and going back to the concept of multipolarity and what it brings, the key principles here are, you know, healthy competition, self-development, sovereignty that is to be self-proclaimed and taken by own initiative, and of course, trying to use more conscious approaches, both at you know, personal level while creating business or introducing projects, and also at the level of international relations, where only mutually beneficial projects and mutual respect could be a durable and resilient strategy.
Thank you so much. Of course, it's about healthy competition, self-defense, and of course, protecting the sovereignty of nations while interacting with the global world, and particularly to the African continent, redefining its own voice and redefining its position at the international stage. In the new world order, we give room for every stakeholder, and of course, like you highly highlighted,